You talk to the nurses, the doctors, you talk to sales reps, you talk to people living with the condition, their caregivers if they have them. You have to get the full community of people that work through there. For somebody with a chronic condition, their journey usually starts way before they have surgery or they have an issue. It's usually a lot of times, when the disease state starts. And so it can be very different based on what brought them there too. Somebody who has ulcerative colitis has a very different experience than somebody who has cancer. You can't just have one patient journey for one person. People have very different life situations. So it's always about problem solving, whether it's the HCP or the patient. The problem solving is built on them, their life, how they are going to go. And especially with chronic conditions, it's about getting people back into their lives. And so we stopped calling people actually patients. I'm saying that right now. We call them consumers because once they leave the hospital, they should be living their life. And so treating them with autonomy and treating them as, like I said, the decision makers in their healthcare.
That's Bridget Linebarger, founder of SpringBridge. In Bridget's 20 years in MedTech, she's experienced nearly every type of corporate ownership, from privately held to private equity to IPO and big publicly traded companies. Corporate cultures were sometimes challenging, but through it all, she kept one thing constant: the patient at the center. She built a patient community of 450,000 users in the United States, led user journey mapping in the ostomy and chronic care space, and now, through SpringBridge, she helps MedTech and life sciences teams translate clinical innovation into messaging that resonates. In today's conversation, Bridget shares her approach to user journey mapping and patient segmentation, and she offers her perspective on what it takes to create marketing strategies that drive real adoption in compliance-driven environments. You won't want to miss this episode of The Digital Clinic. This podcast is sponsored by Wheelhouse Digital Marketing Group. Wheelhouse provides exceptional performance marketing for healthcare and medical device manufacturers. Every Wheelhouse client saw record performance in 2025, even after implementing HIPAA-compliant data solutions. Find out more at wheelhousedmg.com.
You have had a really interesting career from a couple of perspectives. First, you were with one company for 20 years. And so unlike most marketers, you got to set strategy and see your strategy come to fruition over an extended period of time. And now you've got to take what you've learned into your own entrepreneurial pursuits. So I'm interested in sort of a history of your career, and then we can talk about what you're doing now.
So what's interesting is I was at a company for 20 years, but what I like to say to people is it felt like a couple of different companies during that time, because when I started, we were owned by a big pharma company. And then we were sold to private equity. We spent probably longer than private equity wanted to keep us in private equity.
Longer than 5
And
years.
And then we moved to IPO. And so it was a very different experience being owned by big pharma, having less resources when we were in private equity, and then going through that rebuild period after we went IPO. So it was a really good learning experience working in those different atmospheres, if you will. And honestly, some of my favorite experiences were working in that build back period where we had to be scrappy and we didn't have all the resources that we needed at the time. And to see that come to fruition years later was some of the success.
Give us a sense for the MedTech products you were focused on, the strategies you employed. And I know that you had some tremendous successes over this period of time. So tell us about what you built.
Mostly what I worked on was ostomy care. So the company I worked with focused on chronic conditions. So they did things in wound care, catheters, ostomy care. And so what's different about that is that the patient really is at the core. It should be in any medical company. With us, we had such a close relationship with the patient. And one of, I think, the most pivotal moments in my personal development was when I worked on developing our patient program. We had always celebrated the patient, but we never actually talked to them as the decision maker in their own healthcare. And so making that transition and building something that really felt good and building community for people was a great experience. And so I really feel like I'm well-rounded with both the HCP marketing and the patient marketing.
You built community in this company, and you built quite a large community, right? Nearly 500,000
in the US,
users.
yes. Larger
in the
globally,
US.
but in the US, about 450,000 was the last time I checked.
How did you go about building community, and what did you learn from that experience that superpowered your marketing?
I think it's meeting people where they want to be. So you don't Every patient is not a monolith by any means. So some people want to have the information available to them, but they don't want to engage with other people. They want to know it's there and they want to quietly deal with it. Some people want to get their information directly from their HCP and they're not ready to get that information from a company. But as time goes on, you have people who want to engage with the company, with the community, with the social media. So you really have to have a well-rounded strategy and then execution through to really meet people where they are in their journey and how they want to
Mhm.
engage with you.
I would assume that marketing in the ostomy space is a sensitive exercise. You have focused on the customer
Mhm.
journey and on marketing in what feels like a personal way to an end
Yes,
user or
very much.
prospective user. How did that set you and your company apart from others in the space? And what success did that render for you?
So, no matter what our changes were, we always had great people working with us. No matter what individual problems we had with the company, I really felt that we truly did put the patient at the center of everything.
So I'm quite interested what you did in terms of building community. In some of the research I was doing, you made the point that all marketing really should be focused on the end
Yes,
user and what they need and messaging that resonates with them. But in most product driven industries or companies, the instinct is to do the opposite. The instinct is to say, I've got this thing, here are its features, here's why you would want it because of these features. How did the approach that you took
right.
give you insight that made your marketing more effective?
Sure. So it's always about problem solving, whether it's the HCP or the patient. The difference is that with the HCP, you're building that on the clinical evidence and showing them how it solves it and the pain points. With the patient, the problem solving is built on them, their life, how they are going to go. And especially with chronic conditions, it's about getting people back into their lives. And so we stopped calling people actually patients. I'm saying that right now. We call them
Mm.
consumers because once they leave the hospital, they should be living their life. And so treating them with autonomy and treating them as, like I said, the decision makers in their healthcare.
In January of this year, you made a transition and you established your own company called SpringBridge, still focused on MedTech and life sciences and enabling them to make this transition from, all right, I've got a device that's innovative to now I have positioning and messaging and marketing that's resonant. Tell me a little bit about what you're doing and the types of companies that you're working with.
So, working with a lot of chronic conditions as well, and that's where I feel really comfortable, but would love to go into other technologies. But really important that whatever that the innovation is really driving that real world adoption. Because as you were talking about focusing on the features and the benefits, the idea is to really be, as I said, the problem solver. How does this product solve that problem and what are the pain points? And quite frankly, simplifying that message as much as possible. So as a marketer, I'm sometimes the most annoying person in the room with the engineers, the clinicians, everyone else, because I'm asking why over and over and over again. Why does this matter? Why do they care about this mechanism? Why would they change their practice for this? And
Yeah.
so I simplify it down for me, and then I can build it back up for a clinician or a patient.
Yes. Asking lots of really smart, dumb questions.
Exactly. I have no shame. I will ask all the questions.
I know that you have focused in your career on user journey mapping and getting insights through user journey mapping. Can you tell me about the methods that you've used for user journey mapping and how you're bringing that to your own venture now?
A lot of market research has gone into it, especially when we started the patient program. But honestly, the journey's changed a lot in the 10 years that we've done that. People have changed a little bit. And not just the patient journey, but the HCP journey as well. So you really talk to all the stakeholders. You talk to the nurses, the doctors, you talk to sales reps, you talk to people living with the condition, their caregivers if they have them. You have to get the full community of people that work through there. For somebody with a chronic condition, their journey usually starts way before they have surgery or they have an issue. It's usually a lot of times, when the disease state starts. And so it can be very different based on what brought them there too. Somebody who has ulcerative colitis has a very different experience than somebody who has cancer. You can't just have one patient journey for one person. People have very different life situations.
You figured out user journey mapping. You start from the right perspective that most people say that they want to start with
Mhm.
the user in mind.
Yes.
And then they go back to features and functions and benefits and that sort of thing. So I'd like to be able to surface how you get to those insights that then can inform your marketing. But to get beyond like, okay, here's how you would go about this. Here's how someone else, if they were trying to do this the right way, would go about developing a user journey map, and then how they would apply it. And then people will hear that from you and think, oh, that's what we need. I should call Bridget.
Right. And I mean, that is where you're going in and having focus groups. You're actually sitting with people and talking to them and going through what's your day like? What are your most difficult problems? How do you change your appliance? Those are the type of information that you're really digging into to find out how their day to day is. And if you're looking at an HCP journey, you're talking to them. You know, what does a day look like for you? How many patients do you see? How much time do you have with those patients? What, applications are you using? Can you even get Wi-Fi in certain parts of your hospital? How do you interact with these things? You don't want to give somebody an app to fill out information if they can't access the app when they're in the hospital or doing their job. And
Right.
so you really go into the minutia of finding out, because that's where you really find out where the pain points are.
No substitute for actually sitting and asking questions and
Right.
listening to people.
Obviously you do the looking at the internet, you go and do secondary sources, etc., but really getting deep, nothing's better than like a primary source conversation.
Let's jump off in another direction, but still related to user journey mapping. To what extent has AI assisted you in developing user journey maps, if at all?
So it's funny, most of my traditional user journey maps I probably did prior to AI. But AI has been a huge part of my life for the last, I'd say, 2 years. And I see where it could help build, especially since it synthesizes so much information. But you also don't have control over where it's pulling this information. So you have to make sure that it's not skewed one way or another. There are very different situations for different people. And I think that's where you're in really good journey mapping is, because if you're going to use it to, do segmentation and targeting, you need to understand where the nuances are in different people's lives.
Let's jump back to journey mapping and kind of walk through the process. We've gone through user journey mapping. Have you already completed segmentation at that point, or you're completing user journey mapping and you'll derive segments from journey mapping at that point?
We would usually derive segments from journey mapping. And what's funny about that is years ago, we used to just segment based on surgery type, maybe age, etc. And now it's a much more rich set. And I think it's going to have to get even richer going forward. How does somebody interact with technology? What are their most sources of credibility? Is it just their nurse? Are they looking at manufacturers for that type of information? And so the journey mapping helps you about where they're going within their journey, who they are, really has to come, I say almost simultaneously, as you're building them almost simultaneously. But the journey map definitely influences the segmentation and targeting.
So we've walked through journey mapping, we have segmentation. How does that then inform marketing strategy? And what results have you seen from this approach?
The way we've used it in marketing strategy has been more in the execution. It's been more used, and there's more that we can use about what channels you use to reach people. And that's where I've seen it used the most. As we have more technology, and I can probably talk about this later, I think we will use it more in actually targeting people, because we have more opportunity with data to use targeting as long as it's done compliantly. But in the past, we looked at things and you'd say, oh, we don't have money to market here because it's not enough people. We won't hit, it's too small a segment. And I think as that barrier to entry gets lower, we'll be able to market more directly to people and into the segments that they're at.
So tell me a little bit more about that. How we can start to use this in a technology-enabled fashion to be more effective and more cost efficient.
One of the biggest things I think is going to change in the coming years is going to be the richness of content. And I think there's two reasons that's going to happen. Honestly, the data privacy laws is going to mean that the value exchange with somebody is going to have to be better. So the content I'm providing you is going to have to be much better and richer content for you to be willing to give me your information to get that. And then the other reason is AI, because you have to have the content authority to actually fall into the information. If you want to be the leading authority or to actually be playing in AI, you have to have that content to get in there at all. So I think with the better content, we're going to have more places to reach people and to say, oh, you are a young woman who likes pickleball. Here's some information you might enjoy about living your life after surgery, and directly fielding that information to them. Whereas before, some of our information was very broad and generic. I think it's going to be able to be delivered easier to people where they are. And then also, we'll be forced to create that content that they want to actually consume.
You mentioned privacy regulations. You worked during a time where you got to see the evolution and the rise of much more restrictive privacy regulations. How did that affect your marketing, and what do you see for the future?
Yeah, that was a big part I had to evolve as a marketer on, in the sense that I'm a big rule follower. And so I didn't want to put one step out of place. Instead of coming always with the information I should come with, as soon as someone said no, I would say, okay, we just won't do that. Whereas now, as I've matured, I understand that my job as a marketer is to be a partner to that person. I don't need to know all the privacy regulations, but what I do need to do is give the context that they need. I need to tell them what we're trying to do, what are our business goals so they can help me meet them, who I'm marketing to, what I'm collecting, how I'm collecting it, where I'm storing it, who has access to it, all of that information. And if
Mhm.
you have a good partner, they're going to say, okay, you can't do it this way, but if you make these changes, you'll be able to get close to what you're trying to accomplish. That, I think, is the most important thing. And then the next most important thing is to not assume anything. So something that might have been okay 18 months ago, you can't just go ahead and just assume it's okay now. You need to do your due diligence again, because regulations might have changed, or quite frankly, interpretation of the regulations might have changed. Your job as a marketer is to be a good partner and come in with your homework done, to be able to have a really rich conversation with the person who's going to guide you.
November of 2022, the new OCR guidance came out from HHS. What effect did that have on your marketing? Did you find that it negatively impacted your marketing, your ability to target, your ability to measure, and the effectiveness of your marketing, or were you able to successfully navigate and maintain efficacy?
When I was in the US market, I was much closer to the data. Being in the global market, which is where I was when I left, we wanted the data. We didn't always get the data. So I did not, I used to get the reports that said exactly how each campaign did. So I didn't have that visibility anymore to how the campaigns were doing in the individual markets. But I think you're talking about what happened in the US specifically.
Well, yeah, I mean, that certainly impacted the US. We have clients who are global. And so we're both operating in the US under significant privacy constraints in that post OCR guidance, but we're also operating internationally under GDPR.
Do you think GDPR
And
is
we have
worse?
clients.
I think that's a little more. You would know about, yeah,
GDPR can be much more
yes.
restrictive. I think California is working to rival GDPR in some ways, but California has done it in such a sort of fragmented way, whereas GDPR is cohesive and fairly strategic. We also have clients, though, in the US who have simply decided we're global. We are operating to GDPR as our privacy standard.
So when I did things in global, I did them to GDPR because that kind of was the biggest catch-all. And then I caveated that with, when you execute this out into your market, please make sure that it meets your privacy. So I went more by GDPR, but we had our US team. I have a very good friend in the US marketing team. I could find out.
Our experience was that our clients were nervous. We were nervous that we would lose signal. We would lose data fidelity as we weren't able to use third party tracking. Then the efficacy, the efficiency of our campaigns would decrease significantly. What we found instead is it was hard work, but we differently instrumented our campaigns and we implemented different measurement solutions. And instead of optimizing for the big green easy button, which was we captured a lead. That's the thing you can do with third party tracking and analytics. Well, you can't do that anymore if you can't use third party tracking because you're operating under greater data privacy. Instead, we would figure out how to instrument to the moment of real value creation. So the new customer start. You mentioned several important things, right? It's what you collect, it's what you share, it's what you store. Those are the key things. And in particular, what you share. And part of our solution here is that we developed a HIPAA compliant data warehouse and we're under BAA with our clients. And having done that, we were able to integrate with client CRMs. So we can look for those signals that aren't in analytics. They're in the CRM, a new customer start in the CRM, or lead scoring that we turn into a propensity algorithm that we can send back in real time to advertising platforms. The consequence of doing that was that our campaigns actually got much better. Every single client of ours had a record year last
Oh,
year
wow. Yeah.
under much more restrictive data privacy because we were forced to think more strategically about what thing we were instrumenting for.
Was the marketing better or was the capture better, the measurement better?
Both. Because if you're just optimizing for lead capture, you're not necessarily getting a strong quality signal because we both know that, all right, if you get 1,000 leads, some percentage, much less than 1,000 will actually convert. But if what you get is signal on, oh no, that's a new customer start. That's the thing we wanted to happen. Now you know if you've instrumented things right, you know exactly what campaigns, what creative within those campaigns, what audience targeting, what channels drove the thing that has value. And then you can translate that into, oh, this creative concept worked. This one did not. This imagery worked. This targeting. You get all the signals for what truly drove value, which means the marketing got better because the targeting got better, which told you what marketing actually worked.
Were your clients upset at first when they had less leads, or did you have to build the story?
Yeah, this is not a
No.
fast process. There's a big aspect to it that's change management. There's an aspect to it that is political. It's also absolutely true that we couldn't do this unilaterally. We couldn't simply decide on our client's behalf. We needed to drive exceptional performance, which built trust, which gave us access to their data, which they normally wouldn't provide access to. And that allowed us to deliver better results. It is, kind of a flywheel that we had to get going with our clients that you then can see the benefits of in creative and strategy and all of those sorts of things. But yes, it's not an overnight or unilateral decision.
Especially in healthcare marketing, because for the most part, it's not like CPG where you can see how much you've sold the next day. Like it's a much longer window and it takes you a lot longer to see the
Exactly.
results of what you're doing.
We have clients where the time to conversion is as long as a year, even after that lead capture. And so we needed to create mechanisms that projected new customer starts based upon what we understood in terms of lead scoring and the elements that would be likely to indicate that they converted. And then we had to convert that into a propensity model. It
It's
wasn't
mostly
simple.
model. We did modeling with consumer as well because you don't see
Yeah.
the direct sales immediately. So
I often look at LinkedIn posts and see the 3 easy ways to or 5 easy ways to do this. And I thought, what we should post is actually 24 not that easy things that you could do to
yeah.
make your digital marketing for MedTech really
And it's
work.
an ecosystem. You're not going to just do it with digital marketing. Digital marketing is an important part of it. But when it comes to med tech, it's, who are your KOLs? What kind of clinical evidence do you have? It's a full ecosystem. It can't just be some tactics, etc.
It is an ecosystem. As you mature, how can you bring signal in from all of these other things that aren't traditionally data inputs for marketing at all?
That is hard because, you have something like a webinar, you can measure how many people came to the webinar. You have leads from the webinar, but is that what drove it? And so that's where you have to have a good CRM to see all the different touch points that you've had to try and build this bigger picture of where you are actually making a difference. And it's not as easy as just a few KPIs and they tell the whole story. Sometimes
That's
you
right.
have to, I hate to use this, but it's like a dot picture. You have to step back to see everything together.
Did you work at all with media mix modeling?
Not much, no.
We have ended up finding that to be incredibly valuable for the reason that you just alluded to. It allows you to use very large data sets and see what are called direct, indirect, and the joint effects of, all of those marketing inputs, whether they're traditional or digital, whether they seem to be unrelated. It might be weather data for a business that has a seasonal impact. It could be a promotional activity by a competitor, could be a product launch. Attribution modeling is looking for causation. You did this and that did that. This is looking for the indirect, the implicit impacts, so that, for example, you can see that traditional radio advertising that you ran in a particular market did or did not impact conversion in a digital channel. Most importantly and most valuably, you can see where you should be spending your money, what optimal media mix you should have to maximize conversion at or below a target cost of conversion. So it's very complex math, but it allows you to see that complete picture that isn't just digital, isn't just the direct attribution. And now that, as you suggested, so many of the signals are indirect or apparently unrelated at face value, you need to have this kind of modeling environment to see what's truly happening.
Companies collect a lot of data, but I don't think the data is connected as well as they think it is. It's very disjointed. And so it would kind of make me laugh when you'd sit in these meetings and you'd hear C-suite people say certain things and you're like, that's not how this works. Oh, you think we can do that? That is not how. I'm like, it's probably sitting somewhere in Italy somewhere, but we don't have that. Or,
We have that experience too. And we'll have it in the reverse. We'll be in conversations. Our client relationships tend to be very long. They're 6 or 7 years on average. And we'll be in meetings with clients we've worked with for years, and someone will mention that they have a data store that has this thing in it, or has data that maybe tracks something related to HCPs or their interaction or lack thereof. And these are eureka moments for us because we've been asking for this kind of information for like a year or two and didn't think it existed. And the people we work with didn't think it existed. And then we'll find out, oh, somebody had that over there.
it's funny what they think exists. And you're like, oh, no. Or, there's not much we
Right.
can do with that.
Well, let's talk about the future of marketing and maybe the future at the intersection of two things. Increasing data
Mhm.
privacy is brought to bear most restrictively on healthcare and medtech, but I think it's coming for everybody. That's our thesis
I,
anyway.
I agree with
So
you.
at the intersection of data privacy and AI, what do you think marketing, digital marketing looks like 2 or 3 years from now?
I think all marketing will because consumers have realized how valuable their data is and they're protecting it. At a very simple level, everybody's had something creepy happen with their data and they've been like, why did I get this information? How did this get there? So I do think data all in all is going to become more restricted. And I hate to say add value again, but people will give their data if you are doing something of value for them and you are solving a problem for them. But you also have to be respectful of their data. And so it's going to be how you use that data, I think, is where it's really going to come down with. And quite frankly, med tech companies have been good. We don't sell data. I think there's going to be a bigger firewall between patient data and where that gets used within a company. I don't think your sales reps will ever see patient data. They shouldn't. But I don't know. AI makes me scared. I'm asking, how would AI get data from people that you collect?
You can run LLMs that are private
Yes. So like in the
and
companies, yeah.
deployed.
Oh, you're talking about,
That's
so are
right.
you, is the fear that individual employees will upload data?
No, well, so that certainly is a concern. But in asking the question, I'm thinking more of what it looks like to execute digital marketing in 2 or 3 years in a world in which some portions of marketing execution, marketing task management, or even marketing strategy are powered by AI. And simultaneously, data privacy means that the means of audience targeting and the means of measurement that had been absolutely common, say, 5 years ago, are now significantly constrained.
Now that you're framing it that way, I can see. So the biggest thing is if you Google something, it'll most likely you'll be on the top search. They'll click on there, they'll go to your website, and hopefully there's a CTA somewhere that you can capture that data. If they're going to AI, they may never see your website. And so how are they going to interact with you? And I think that's going to be the biggest piece is how do you get HCPs or patients to directly interact with your company when quite frankly, they don't have to go to any of your websites or interfaces or your social media to get that information from your company. I don't know how to solve for it. I would have to think about that, how you would solve for that problem. But then the question is, are they going to sell with ads? So ads are a big thing that you hear about in AI. If they start selling ads, is that going to be something? And then that might be a privacy issue too. People don't want ads for medical conditions showing up on their AI. That could be a big ethical question, or question that could come up down the road. Is companies I certainly would probably want to buy ads, but will they be allowed to buy ads? Are they allowed to have pushes to their website?
A few minutes ago, you used the word respect. Messaging that respects the audience is a focus
Mhm.
for you. Tell me a little bit about what that means. How do you develop messaging that respects the audience? What's the value of that aside from the ethical value? What's the utility value, the pragmatic value of that?
Well, it's a trust that they build with you. It depends who you're talking to, too, whether it's an HCP audience or a patient audience, but you understand their pain points. That's the biggest thing, is that you understand what is driving them for this information and that you're trying to solve a problem for them. And with a patient, it is, talking to them, like I said, as a consumer, as somebody that has autonomy in their health, and giving them the information that they might not even know that they can ask for, whether it's about intimacy, dating, exercise, nutrition, that type of information that they may want to have going forward.
Tell me about SpringBridge.
At SpringBridge, we help MedTech and life science teams successfully transition their products and services from promising innovation to celebrated solution. I have personally driven product adoption by overcoming the challenges of translating clinical evidence and innovation into positioning, messaging, and launch execution. With nearly 20 years in the industry, I know the importance of grounding marketing in real HCP and patient needs, and using that foundation to deliver downstream marketing strategies that enable successful commercialization and launch excellence. I really appreciate being able to do this and having a conversation.